Hello everyone, Christina Warner here. Welcome to another video. Today I'm playing with Lindy's Magical Powders. These have been out for quite some time. I have not tried them myself personally, but I finally put in an order. Got a bunch of different colors, and this is just one of the sets that I got. So hopefully I'll use these more in the future. But just for this very first test, I'm using some Fabriano Artistico Extra White watercolor paper, and I'm taping it down to a board because I'm just going to have fun creating a nice background. At this point, I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just wanted to get these powders out and start playing with them. So the set that I bought has 5 colors, and I'm going to open up each one of these and place it off to the side with the lid next to each jar so that I can keep them separate. Now, these jars that I bought do not have sifters in them. I think on their website, they actually have kind of some really good information explaining the difference between their different products. The ones that I got today do not have the sifters, so you can actually pick up the product directly from the jar. The first color I'm using is Prima Donna Purple, and then we have High Maintenance Magenta and Sassy Sapphire. Those are the 3 colors I picked. I'm going to start out by wetting the surface of my watercolor paper. I've used similar products in the past, and they look really, really neat when they're dropped directly onto wet paper. I'm using a little fan brush. This is actually from the Silver Brush Company. They have like a set of mini brushes. I'll try to link this if I can find it, but it was just in my stash, so that's what I picked up. I saw someone using a fan brush like this to pick up powders, and I thought it looked really great. Can't remember if it was Jennifer McGuire or if it was someone else. I did a little bit of research before playing with these powders, and this is just the method that I chose. So I initially dropped on some of the powders, just a little bit of each. I don't know that I really went into the purple one much yet, but I let that spread out. And then I had these really, really strong dots where a lot of powder fell down initially, and it really wasn't moving very much. So I decided to add more water, just sprayed more on, and then used a paper towel to sop things up. Now I'm going to speed up the video footage until I'm done with the background here, just because I was working on this for quite some time. But basically, I just picked up my board to try to manipulate the water with the color kind of moving across my paper here and kind of getting things moving. And I loved the kind of more white, clean section at the top and how the color was moving toward the bottom. So I dried this. This was my initial kind of layer of color. I dried it completely and then came in with more powder. Now I'm putting the powder directly onto dry paper now and then coming in with a spray bottle and adding moisture. And it just, those drops where the powder was just didn't move. So then I used the brush, like a regular brush, and started kind of painting with it. And once I started moving things around, it was making sort of cloud shapes. And then I thought, I'm going to go with this. It's looking very dreamy, really ethereal. So I'm going to try to do kind of layers of clouds. I thought that would be really, really cool. So now I'm putting on some of that purple at the bottom, getting some nice cloud shapes, and continually picking up my board and sopping up some water. So I dried it again because I really love how this is kind of getting a really layered look here. And now I'm going to bring in some blue, kind of the same method that I did before, powder on dry paper, add the water, and then start painting. And this gives you kind of like a really diluted color as you go across here. And then I decided, I'm going to try painting a little bit differently. I'm going to put the powder onto a block and add water to it and then see what happens. And the color was much stronger. So if you want a really strong color with these powders, that would be the way to go. Kind of mix your own paint on a separate palette and then bring it to your project. I'm going to dry this again. And then I'm going to start doing some splatters with all the colors. So I used an acrylic block, kind of put together some of that paint. And first I tapped my brush to put the blue droplets on. But then I moved to a different acrylic block that has a nice harsh edge. And I went to my usual splatter technique, which is running the brush off the edge of a sharp edge, and it puts down a nice splattering of color. And I did that with the pink shade. And then I decided to grab some white gouache and I put that on the edge of the block, and I put some white dots on it. And this sort of, I don't know, I just love the look of whitewash splattered onto a fun background like this. So then this background sat in my craft room for 2 weeks while I was sick. And I just last night, played with it. So it was coming off the board because it had been sitting there for so long. So I just removed the tape and I have this beautiful background. So you'll notice that the shimmer in the powders, that's kind of like what they're known for, is it has a really fun shimmer. It's very similar to the shimmer powders from Tonic, their Nouveau shimmer powders. It's very similar. You can see that shimmer, but I'm going to rub my finger across the surface and see if I get much shimmer on my skin. And I really didn't. The shimmer stays on the paper and it's not as noticeable in the video. In real life, it has quite a bit of shimmer too. It's very beautiful. I took the A2 layers dies from Waffle Flower and I cut this out so that the background could be the entire surface of my A2 card. So I used the largest die for that, and that's going to be my background. I wanted to preserve as much of the background as possible. So I'm going to use this little stamp set from Avriel. I picked it up at Simon Says Stamp a few weeks ago. This is the Spread Magic stamps and dies, and I'm going to stamp this little unicorn onto some watercolor paper. This is the same watercolor paper that I use for my background, and I'm stamping it in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's a waterproof ink, so it's great for watercolor, and I'm going to continue watercoloring for my card here. I considered coloring with alcohol markers, but in the end decided to just watercolor. I did heat set or speed dry the ink just to make sure that it was completely dry, because it's really only waterproof once it's dry. But if the ink's pretty juicy, you might get some smearing or smudges. I'm using my Magello Mission Gold paints today, and I'm going to be mainly just using a few colors. I'm going to be using a really bright pink, a bright purple, a bright blue, and then I'm going to add in some grays and some pan grays just for a little bit of shading. But for the most part, I kept this painting very, very simple. By the way, I'm using a size 3 round brush from Altenew. I've had their brushes in my stash for a while, but haven't really used them much. But I taught an Altenew class over the weekend, and while I was prepping for that class a few months ago, kind of fell in love with this brush. It's a really, really nice brush, comes to a very fine point, but it also has a nice big base to the brush so it can hold a lot of paint. So it's actually really nice. And once again, that's a number 3 round brush from Altenew. I think you have to buy their brushes in a set. I don't know if you can buy them individually. If you can, I'll link down below. I'm adding a little bit of kind of a grayish blue shade. This was a color that was already on my palette mixed up. I don't know entirely what it was. I think it may have been Payne's Gray with a little bit of black. Now, when I paint little animals or critters, I like to put a little blush on their cheek. I think it really animates them and looks really, really cute. So I did add a little bit of pink onto the unicorn at this point. And then I came back in with more shading on the body of the unicorn. And this time I didn't have any kind of blue in the color. I think it was mostly just black, and kind of faded that out with a clean brush. And then I'm going to go back to add some shading on the mane and the horn of the unicorn and also the tail, just to get just a little bit more shadow in those areas. So I added some shadow onto the hooves, and then I'm going to go back to the cheek and I'm going to put in a nice circle dot. I thought that looked a little bit more animated. Then I decided I didn't like it. So I got it wet and picked it up with a paper towel. And I thought, you know what? I'll just paint in a heart. I thought that was super, super cute. I dried the unicorn really, really well since I knew I would be die cutting it. And then I grabbed my Anna Griffith Empress machine plates and I broke open that coordinating die set. I'm just using the unicorn outline die, and I'll run that through my die cutting machine. So my plan for this card is I thought I'd put the unicorn popped up on some foam adhesive, and then I'd have kind of like some little elements from the stamp set stamped around it. And I would also heat emboss the greeting. Now I wanted to just test my background to make sure that nothing would stick to it. So I sprinkled on some white embossing powder and it passed the test. So then I got out my MISTI and did some more stamping. Now, normally I would use my grid transparency sheet over top of this, but I couldn't find it. So I just used the plastic from a Misty sticky mat, and I put that down over the whole project, and then I arranged my stamps on top of that clear sheet. Now you'll notice I've got all these little stars and little hearts, just little tiny images from the stamp set. Now I put those around the unicorn, but they're small enough. I think you could actually put those on the unicorn itself so that it kind of looks like a My Little Pony. I played with those when I was a little girl, and they're still being sold these days, but um, I can't remember what they called those. Like it's like their specific patterning on each animal, and they called them something. It was like a I can't remember what the let me know in the comments down below what it's called, but it has this cute little name for what the little images are that are on the back of the unicorn or the horse. I just think it's so fun. So I stamped the greeting and the stars and hearts twice. This is watercolor paper and it's textured, so I wanted to get the best result possible. So I did stamp it twice in Versamark, and then I sprinkled on the white embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then I'm going to use my heat tool to heat set this until it's smooth and melted. This only took a second or two, and I was really surprised how well it worked on top of that watercolor paper. It looks nice and smooth. Even those little tiny words look great. I then put some Altenew adhesive on the back of my watercolor panel and put that directly onto a top folding card base made out of some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. Press that down onto the card base, and then I grabbed my little unicorn, and it's going to go on here kind of tilted off to one side. And I put some foam adhesive on the back. I just used some narrow strips of adhesive from Waffle Flower. And then using my tweezers, I held it over my project and got that in just the right position and put that down. The last thing I'm going to do is add some sequins. I'm using some iridescent sequins from, these are from Picket Fence Studios, I believe. I think their color, it's called Moonstone, Iridescent Moonstone or something like that. I'll have a link down below. So here is the finished card. I like the additional sparkle from the sequins, and the shimmer on that watercolor paper is just gorgeous. Turns out really, really cute. Can't wait to send this off to someone for their birthday. Thanks so much for watching today. If you would like to win this stamp and die set, I'll have a giveaway down in the video description. Just fill out that form and I'll pick a winner, and the winner's name will be posted here in the YouTube description. Just a reminder, I never reply to comments and say you've won a giveaway. So if that happens, it's probably not me, and you can ignore it and report that comment. I will only contact you via email if you are a winner, and I will also put your name in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.